welcome to the Youth Roundtable on Civic Space TV this week. Today, with me, your host, Okotola, we looked at an array of different issues that happened in the last 1 week in our country. And a couple of issues that piqued interest for us as youth is one, the election that happened in Oyam North, where we saw Dr. Eunice Apio tramping over Engola Jr. I was mistaken with the father in the election, where we saw UPC defeat the NRM by a margin of about 600 votes. I think that's an interesting discussion. There are a lot of issues arising from that, including the gender perspective, opposition winning, election culture, in our country, especially by-elections. So we shall be analyzing that with my very capable panel. But the other issue, and very close to home, is the issue of scrapping off the student loan scheme. To be more precise, it was suspended after close to 10 years of operations. So we shall be discussing the effects of that in 2 segments. And to break down these issues with me today is a very capable panel, starting from the my far right, the ever-present, evergreen Lawel Mwezi from Tuzungumizi, Africa, which for our dear viewers translates to "let's discuss." And as you can see, is a very deliberative gentleman. You're most welcome.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure. I look forward to one of the other interesting conversations.
Yeah, thank you, Lawel. And then we have Peace Prima. You're most welcome. Peace is the founder and executive director of Nile Girls Forum. It's amazing to have you here, and we look forward to your insights. Feel free to greet our viewers.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me one more time on the Youth Roundtable. It's always a pleasure to share. Thank you.
Yeah. And finally, we have a very sleek gentleman over here. He goes by the names Honorable Sam Ogwal. Sam Ogwal is the Finance Secretary at the National Youth Council, the body that holds all of us as youth together. You're most welcome, Sam.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ola.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure being hosted here again.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So straight to the discussion, my dear colleagues. We had a by-election in Oyam North. We saw last month, couple months ago, the tragic shooting of Engola Senior, that is Charles, who was the State Minister for Labour. And recently, as the law dictates, there has to be a by-election to replace him as a Member of Parliament for Oyam North, which was his constituency. It was a heated election. We saw his son, Engola Jr., coming on to contest in what we see now as a common trend of sons maybe going after, their father's positions. And a very capable lady as well, Dr. Eunice, a PhD in social anthropology herself, Eunice Apio. It was a tight election. We all were following news, and the final result was announced by the Independent Electoral Commission, and Eunice managed to win the vote by a margin of 600. Right now, I would just like to have your general reflections on what happened before we delve deeper. And I'll start from Mr. Lawel.
I don't know why you picked to point out a very capable lady because of maybe her academic background.
Yes.
You know so much that most of the people who were implicated in the Iron Sheet scandal are equally well educated, including the line minister.
Yeah.
Also was, I think, has a PhD and is as a former lecturer. So for me, those things no longer really matter so much in these discussions.
Interesting.
But also, if you want to have a clear picture of what Oyam looks like, and which is also a reflection of what most by-elections look like, you want to look at most of the trending things on social media and newspaper, in the press.
Yeah.
Today I was looking at, there's a cartoon by Ogom, the one of Daily Monitor, where Dr. or Professor Tango Doi was in a book speaking, and it says, these are my scripts. You get as if he's marking papers, and then the lady Apio and Akena on the other side were saying, "Ain't we one of your students?" Something like that. I think for me, what continues to happen and what should be disabused is the electoral malpractice.
Yeah.
That has been really what has cut across all by-elections. Vote rigging. Sometimes people have already finished voting by 8 a.m.
Yeah.
And for me, I don't know why, like I said, these things of academic, being an academic, being someone who is supposed to be of guidance to the nation is perpetrating. For me, it's just that everyone, from an average Ugandan to even the cream of our country, think that being a genius politically is if you can rig, if you can, it doesn't matter how you win.
Yeah.
I think for me, that's what continues to
Did you
concern
say
me
being
most.
a genius if you can rig?
Yeah, as long as you can get the win, it doesn't matter how.
Yeah.
As long as you've won, then you've performed, then you are a political genius. And I think for
so we
me,
don't have a culture of losing.
it's not a culture. I think it's that our it's our leadership, our democracy, it does not make a lot of sense. And that is why I am very hesitant to just discuss what this win means. Because for me, it's just one of the, how many MPs we have, 400, 500. I don't think that the result, the fact that someone won, for me is very significant to the discussion we should have. For me, it is just an analysis on where we are as a country in terms of leadership and ethic.
Yeah.
Because for me, the biggest insult to a voter, to a Ugandan, is rigging, really, because a vote is supposed to reflect aspirations.
Yeah.
It's supposed to represent what they really want to get. And this kind of behavior that continues to be perpetrated in by-elections, it undermines everything. Even when we have leaders, we are not sure they represent the aspirations of Ugandans. Something small.
Yeah.
So for me, then, the win by appeal is like a triumph against not evil per se. Church leaders want to use that evil, but against bad. Because you realize that for an opposition candidate to win a by-election, they don't have to get the majority. They have to get, like, not even beyond an obvious majority, that even when they are rigged, it is not enough to take away the win. I don't know if you get it.
Yes.
So for me, Honorable Appeal's win for me is a triumph against bad. And I don't think, for me, it's about whether it's NRM, but it's for me, it's a win against the whole culture of abusing people's aspirations. And for me, I think that is what it represents. But I also think that it's just a reflection that speaks to the political terrain. The fact that, because for me, it would have been, for me, the result was what I expected, that the region would still has that UPC attachment, and that when we make these discussions about the future of the country, that we need to identify that different regions have different attachments, have different considerations, and that we need to think about the not ethnic but regional differences, and how do we take care of everyone, as opposed to assuming that Uganda all of a sudden has become this new liberal template where we are all on the same page. Yes.
No, that's interesting. But just to query you into that, the issue about political culture, what's the chain of command in this rigging? Because we saw Tango Doi distancing himself from some of the things that happened. We saw the president congratulating Dr. Eunice, but also making it clear that rigging is not within the terms of engagement of the NRM. So are these overzealous or over-politicized citizenry that?
Me and you, and this, I don't like to argue academically or to people using legal arguments that was there proof. When we went to court, why didn't they win? Why wasn't the proof sufficient?
Yes.
Me and you know outside that level of conversation.
I'm
That,
just
first way,
moderating.
yes, I'm just saying, and youth represent
Yes.
all of us,
Yeah.
that it is virtually impossible for ballots to be full at 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. Are we clear? It's not possible. I may not be able to prove it in courts of law because I have not gathered sufficient evidence or I didn't have resources. But outside the confines of legal arguments and courts and the burden of proof things, me and you know that rigging happens when such a thing happens. But even when you have casual conversations with people, especially in the NRM, who are always at casual level, they will tell you that even before the election happens, the register has already been corrupted. So even if on the day there's utmost transparency, it's still not fair.
Yeah.
And I think for me, this discussion should be about who is guilty, who is wrong. I even think sometimes that if some opponents had the same opportunity, they would do the same. The issue is, how do we deal with this culture of people understanding that a vote represents much more than just who has won, but the aspiration of citizens who we seek to serve.
Yeah. Thank you, Lawel. Over to you, Prima. What are your reflections looking back at the recent elections in Oyam North, with Dr. Eunice coming out on top?
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me once again.
Yeah.
I have been closely following the elections, and I think from my perspective, one thing for sure is that the UPC is predominantly in the Lango sub-region, and that is something that...
Is that true? Sam?
I,
In terms of numbers of MPs?
No, I mean, we saw this in the elections. You could see that there was a UPC candidate, there was the NRM, there was the NUP, and the rest on board. But then you can see that they exercised, that they were able to show us that through the just recently concluded elections. But also one thing for sure that I see from this election is that people are actually getting to deal away with the notion of, people get into positions of influence just because, you're a woman. And I'm just bringing it from the gender perspective. Of for a long time, people think for peace to be on this panel right now, it's maybe just because Civic Space TV needed a woman represented on the panel. But it also really showed that people are now actually looking at what a woman brings to the table, and you would still see, because she was the only woman in this race.
Yes.
But I mean, by the time she is voted in that position, it definitely shows that there's something she had to offer, because, recently, if we're having elections, we go through a process. There is vetting, there are debates and all these things. So personally, I would just really appreciate that, women are getting into these spaces, but they're not just joining the table, but they're now coming with the table.
Yeah.
But the unfortunate instances that happened during this election, of course, like my colleague has shared, issues of malpractice. And I think that is one thing that is still holding us back as a country, that every now and then when we hold an election, you'll not take a time without hearing that there was malpractices and all this. But also, I think as a country, that point of accommodating, you even see that sometimes when clearly there is evidence, or even people have been named for these practices, people are not brought to book. The conversation fades. But I also think that is something that we really need to look at closely, because I believe that for an election to be fair, then things like rigging really shouldn't be there. As much as people keep having that conversation, no, we're going to bring people to book. But then, these are conversations that fade.
But there are cases where people have been taken to court. And actually, for example, in Bukunjiri, where it was overturned. So I don't know, but yeah, maybe to an extent, but someone would argue that, for example, there are court systems where you could, appeal an election.
Yes, sure.
And the courts actually prioritize this when placed before them.
Yes, sure. But we all realize that sometimes even before you go to that court, it all goes back to, people are going to ask you, how much more evidence do you have? And sometimes even the person going into court is definitely has a higher chance. We all know these things happen. They have a higher chance of winning over that case. But even sometimes when these issues are overturned in favor of the other person, it has still not taken away the fact that even when other elections come, we are still going through the same processes, because you'd question why. But also you'd see that one other thing that caught my attention during this process was when the president actually wrote out and he was congratulating UPC. You'd also see that him as the president, he called out, what happened in the NRM camp, as this is something that the government doesn't condone.
Yes.
And I think it's also good for us to really appreciate that as the president, he's actually saying, no, I am not in the right path with you if you're rigging elections, if you're doing all these sort of malpractices. And I think just like you've given that example of Rukundiri, I think we saw in Bukedia when there were the elections.
Yes, last month.
Yes, and I think that is also a right direction that, for example, the head of state would take. And I think it was also good to see him.
I think it's important to note that in Bukedia, the opposition, Mr. Mago, was NRM leaning. Also, UPC general is NRM leaning.
Yes.
We are yet to see the president congratulating.
NRM is also UPC leaning.
Yes, we are yet to see the president outrightly congratulating full of. But yeah, you can proceed.
I think that is also like a step towards, because we have not really been seeing, the president congratulating a UPC candidate, or for example, but I think that is at least a good direction that we are heading out to, because if he's calling out the people that are engaging these malpractices, and in this case, who were alleged to be the NRM people, I think that is a good direction that we are heading towards.
You bring up an important issue about culture, and that I think Lowell also talked about it, that we should focus on the general culture rather than the legal frameworks of how these things are solved and resolved. And I will get back to Lowell on the sufficiency of the president's messages. Thank you you brought an important issue about culture rather than, the legal proceedings as something that we need to look forward to correct. And you also talked about the president's messages, which I think Lowell will address on whether they are sufficient as, a sign of progress in this democratic space. But before we go forward, we have Mr. Gerard Oyeki joining us. He's the Northern Region Coordinator for the National Unity Platform. You're most welcome.
Thank you, Paul.
Yes. And just to start from you, we had an election last week where we saw Dr. P.O. Eunice coming on top of the by-election that happened in Oyam North, defeating Angola Jr., that is. And what were your reflections looking at, this election, and what are the implications for our democracy in general?
Yes, thank you so much, Paul, for hosting this important talk show and this session. It comes as timely as it is. I was at the center of the elections. My name is Oyeki Gerald, Secretary of Mobilization, National Unity Platform, Northern Region. Definitely, from a person observation, you can clearly tell that Uganda's politics actually is still largely ethnic in nature. It also has the question of it being so much attached to its founding fathers and also the origin of its founders. It plays a very big role. That also goes to show you that the politics of
Can you break this down for the viewers?
Yes. So you realize that the founders of the parties usually hold where they come from. Even long after the parties become unpopular, they still hold they still have a stronghold, a strong base of support in the areas where they come from. So you find that in perspective, for example, the Uganda People's Congress, whereas Obote was not really the coordinator or the primary founder of the UPC, but he elevated Uganda People's Congress and became its president. But also through Uganda's political history from the time of the birth of Uganda, independence Uganda, you find that Obote's UPC was able to move the country from that time till from Obote 1 and Obote 2. So you find that within the Lango sub-region where Obote hails from, you find that the UPC is actually deeply rooted. But whereas also you have a demography of the older population across the country, as far as Kabale, Bushenyi, you find that the old people in their 60s, 70s were still, those who lived in the times, the glorious days of the Obote government, will still honor the achievements of UPC and Obote at large.
Yeah.
So you find that such an election gives the population a recollection of the times of Obote. This was how government was running. So you find that in a place like Langosa, I would want to think that even that will not be any different from the NRM. Or I love to call it NRA because I believe it's a rebel occupation still. That where Museveni hails from demographically, long after Museveni is gone, NRM will still have a strong footing in those areas, in the demographies. I'm not so sure about FDC and the reform agenda.
Yeah.
But in the broader sense, that even the National Unity Platform, which I subscribe to, even the Democratic Party, you find that its credo, there's always a stronghold.
Does that mean that the statement by the president after the last election that NUP was a Uganda movement, does that render it true based on your argument?
Well, its origin is in Uganda. The difference is that you find that as the population keeps getting educated and people keep interacting along the different ethnicities, we tend to keep breaking those boundaries of ethnicity as a generation. So the question of whether NUP is a Uganda movement, I think it's a question of time. It's a question of how far we go in as far as expanding our influence is concerned across the country, but also realize that really a sitting government or a ruling government has the capacity, whether be it ethnic or not, has the capacity to expand its influence across board. Because then you'd advance the same argument in as far as NRM is concerned. And I'd want to assume or imagine that in as far as the national outlook is concerned, I think the UPC was able to do that. Particularly, I think Obote, whether Obote 1 or Obote 2, one of the two governments of Obote. Because whereas I've not lived to see a government beyond the Museveni government, I have had testimonies from the older guard, from as far as Kabale, Kanungu, Bushenyi, adoring and worshipping the government of Obote 1 and 2. Probably because of his development agenda at the time. So the experiences, as you've asked, what I gather from the Oyam North by-election, that you could clearly hear people have these statements of they thought that the gun can win the election, but for us we want a civilian government, we want a civilian MP. These are old people in their 60s, 70s. So it clearly shows that the sentiments are still deep in people's hearts, that let us return to civilian rule, civilian governance. And this was just a statement I had from 3-4 people. But you know, these are reflections of what the broader mass says. And also, given the nature of our elections, see the outburst, the outrage from the likes of Tango Odoi, because he was used to, go get the ballot stuffed, declare. But then you find resistance, and this was more of like, because someone mentioned it was more of like a competition of who can rig better between UPC and NRM, which I did not believe there was as such rigging on the other end, as so much rigging on the other end of UPC. The question of whether UPC was allowed to win because it's married to the NRM, I think that's a discussion for another day. I think it's a reflection of history, but also the nature of our politics as a country. Whether we are able to transcend the politics of ethnicity in as far as, and then also the politics of personalization of the politics. That if Paul is the founder of, let's say, the Liberation Front of Uganda, and he's long gone, that means the party ceases to exist. And whoever believes in that front will believe in Paul, that when Paul does not exist anymore, the party ceases to exist. I think that is still the stage we are yet contend with as a nation.
But I think, Mr. Oyeke, one of the most important things that you could add to this debate is what was NUP's official approach to this? You could run our viewers through NUP's official approach. to this Oyam North by-election?
Well, we went to the election conscious of the odds,
Yes.
but also conscious of our nation's history. You see, it is tricky, and it's not wise usually to go into an election without bearing in mind and being conscious of the broader sense of your history as a country.
Yeah.
Because we are yet to transcend from the period of democratically transitioning the president or the face of government. From the time of independence, there's always been coups, overthrows, and then you have Museveni overthrows Tito Okello, and then he's the first since then.
Yeah.
Into Oyam North, we came into this space appreciating the history, appreciating the traditions of the people, and also knowing the history of the place that it has usually been UPC stronghold.
Yeah.
Myself, I am aware that the late, may so rest in peace, consistently returned to parliament because of the state rigging machinery. But traditionally, UPC has been winning Oyam North constituency. It has been its best. But also, as a new formation, our candidate, Okello Daniel, he was actually from the UPC. Then he joined us, International Platform. So we are also conscious of that being a councillor in the area, people actually voted, I should say, the personality of Dan Okello. They knew him. He's a teacher of the area.
Yeah.
So it also comes with politics and the person.
Yeah.
How do you convey the message to the people? Going into the election, I actually had imagined that the NRM voting machinery would overpower any other, and Angola would be declared MP.
Yeah.
But also understanding the politics of Museveni and the politics of appeasement of Museveni, probably he found himself in a compromising situation. You appreciate that all through Museveni's coming into power and going to the bush, it wasn't necessarily actually because of vote rigging. It was failure to share power. That is between Obote and while they were coming from Tanzania, and when they were overthrowing Amin, they had actually agreed, let us share power. And they failed to agree on that. I think that was the primary reason. That's why Museveni actually went to the bush with the reason of excuse of vote rigging.
Yeah.
I mean, a man who was able to secure 96 votes cannot go countrywide in his election then, cannot claim that he was rigged or there was rigging. Semogeri would have justification for that, but not Museveni. So Lango, going into that election, we were conscious of that history, conscious of the fact that if the NRM had wanted to go so hard on that election, they would have actually done it because they have the machinery. They have monopoly over the violence, over the election materials. I had to confront the RDC on the pre-polling meeting on the instructions I was trying to give, that no one is allowed into Oyam North on the day of election. No elected politician from outside the Oyam North was allowed into the constituency. And the question was, where does the law stipulate that?
Yes.
That people cannot move into the constituency and not to the constituency. So it forced me to confront him before he could put down the microphone on that same note. So it was a mix of history. It was a mix of definitely we're testing the waters. I could say that Oyam North is one area where we performed so well in 2021 presidential elections as a national unity platform. But also we are conscious of our history.
Yes.
I would want to say that it has not been a very good history, especially between Lango, I should say, and Buganda. We are conscious of that. And as far as post-1980 is concerned, or even Obote 1 and Obote 2.
Yes.
So deriving from that history, we are aware, but then we are saying, can our generation of the younger people transcend that history and find a bridge around it? Yeah.
Thank you very much. And it's very interesting that, Ewano Yeki from Northern Uganda is trying to balance the dynamics, historical dynamics of Lango and Buganda. But I think that's also a testament to a progressive future.
It's very important.
And I'll get back to you on your assessment of this, the handling of the election with UPC as the main opposition, but vis-a-vis the many elections where an NUP has been
the main opposition.
But then right now I'd like to move on to a very important voice.
Yeah.
I intentionally waited because I wanted, you're high up in the youth hierarchy. We are really lucky to have you today because you're also from the region, where the sub-region, Lango sub-region, where this election happened. Given what our colleagues have talked about, their reflections on political culture, on gender, would like to hear your voice.
Thank you very much, the moderator. I must say that the election that took place in Oyam was a very interesting one. And it dictates the kind of the political dynamics we have in the sub-region. When you look at Lango, I happened to study from Lango, primary, secondary. It's only the university that brought me to Kampala. And historically, your parents would just keep telling you the good deeds Obote was doing during his time of leadership. And of course, Obote used to support the community when he was a president. The interaction between the Langi and other people from the West, mostly in Bushenyi, where Obote used to interchange this national celebration. And people, most people from Lang would put them in a bus and take them to Bushenyi. And people stay there for like 1 week, drinking, dancing. And literally that translates to why you will go to Bushenyi and UPC will be talk more. People have a lot of conversation. When they say, I'm from Lango, oh, you're from Lango, Obote. So it's like, it introduces that kind of identity within the Lango community and also across the country. How did NRM came into prominence in northern Uganda? You know that northern Uganda has been going through a lot of war. The LRA issue, the Lakwena issue. And out of that, when peace relatively returned to the sub-region, it automatically generated discussion. Like the NRM would go and say, the president would go and say, I brought for you guys peace. And of course, people who have been through war, they wouldn't want to go back into destabilization again because of political interest. They will appreciate that. And this has relatively been happening for over 15 coming to 20 years after the LRA insurgency coming to an end in the year 2006. Now, what the people of Lango are focusing on, and this is where maybe I think the party did not take keen interest in it, is that people are now at the development stage. We need to survive. We are now peaceful. And one of the key pillars to development is the road infrastructure, which the government has relatively ignored it within the sub-region. When you do your analysis, you'll find that it is only Lango in the entire sub-region, in the entire country, whereby there's no district connected by tarmac. You get it. You go to Leptong, you go to Yam, you go to Amolatar, Kwania. All these districts are not connected by tarmac. And that conversation has been coming. But when you go to other places, I'm connecting Jinja, Mayuge, where there's tarmac. I'm going to Bunyoro, the districts are connected by tarmac road.
But Sam, on the president, I believe there were several processions that went to him complaining about Kambini.
Yes, exactly.
And he said, while he issues instructions, he says he doesn't know at what point. And he actually one point said he's going there himself to supervise the road.
If you could see, because I know our president is a smart guy. He noticed that if he keeps quiet, automatically this thing will turn into another thing. And he needs the support of that sub-region for him to be in power as well. He really needs it. Because when you look at our political dynamics, I think it is Northern, which is paying so much allegiance as a bloc in the sub-region to the ruling party. So the day any sub-region or the region itself breaks out of the system and says that, you know what, at this point, the bridge from Karoma going the other side, we shall all have our system and we shall support someone that is going to stand for our interests. Then the party will be in a dilemma. So that's why he had to respond very quickly. I remember the demonstration was planned, happened like 2 days. Immediately that very night he met the the Lango MPs.
Yes.
Then the next day he was flying to Oyam to inspect on the road and all conversation.
Yeah.
He had to make sure that he's concerned.
Yes.
But I don't agree that he wasn't aware of what is happening. And because that road was a key connecting point, right from Karumba, Kamdini,
Yes.
up to Lira district, and then from Lira district to Soroti.
Yeah.
Soroti connects now to Malaba, which is to the border.
Yes.
So literally anyone who is leaving Lango have to use that road.
Yes.
So it was a big concern.
Yeah.
And it's not only that, but of course the general road network is bad and it's a key point. If you were there in the campaign, I'm very sure the issue of the road came out very loudly. But also, you should understand that the quality of the candidates. I come from Lango.
Yes.
If UPC is interested in taking up an area, they can take it. They will look at the candidate, how eloquent the candidate is, how does the candidate bond with the people. So they look at all qualities of a candidate, and then they will invest. They will not use a lot of money, because I've had experience. You see, passionately, people are supporting someone because they're UPC, and I've been a UPC. I've been born in the UPC. And of course, also our elders keep playing a lot of role in trying to guide. When we go for meeting, Langis, we want always to agree in-house. And then when we are moving out, we move out with our decisions inside. I think that's why NRM was shocked to see that they were losing, because when everyone was happy, but they didn't know what really happened inside. But the conversation around the qualities of the candidate, Engola Jr., coming from UPC, previously competed with the father before, and all that, and also the history. And this is something that is not coming out clearly. And my brother from NUP did mention is that, of course, the late or was in military, played a very key role towards the pacification of that district and that area. But when it comes to democracy, people would love to see that you are someone who's accommodative to the ideas. You are not authoritative. If you are authoritative, they feel disgruntled, even if how good you are, and they try to. So I think he has been more authoritative, neglecting the structures, and also doing things the way you feel like it appeases him. And out of that, the community were already disgruntled. But of course, when problem has happened, people have to sympathize. That's why Junior was able to accumulate such a number of votes. But in their heart, they knew that Junior was not the right candidate. They knew that, yes, the late was a minister. We have lost a minister. But literally, in one way or another, his history could not make the family and the community to stand with the family at that time. So basically, I think the choice of the candidate, that's where the party went wrong. But also NRM demonstrated that something, Northerners, mostly Langese, they don't like so much authority. But the moment whereby the party took the entire government, so like, okay, you're brought now the propaganda of that. Now you're pairing people from other places to come and vote to convince us don't we know what we want?
Manage them.
So you find our chief whip was there. The good thing come from Lang, which is not bad, but of course the secretary general was there. The entire NRM party was there. The president had to go there. For me, the day the president was campaigning, I knew that there was a problem. Because coming out from that sub-region, and when they hear that the head of state is coming, that's enthusiasm. But I didn't see it coming out clearly. And I would know that this thing might not be good for the party. So I think the way they approached the system, and they were not coordinated. You see the chairperson of the Electoral Commission for the party was there also giving instruction. The ONC team were also on the ground getting instruction from other teams. Also, of course, you look at the secretariat team was also on the ground giving instructions, and all this integrated fraction of the NRM gave actually the UPC a mileage. I come from a district, and my chairman is the UPC, the district chair. He was at the forefront. So after the election, I talked to him. He was like, you see, we invested so much into vote protection to the aspect of rigging, electoral malpractice, because he knew that, at the end of the day, NRM would want to declare the candidate, and the rest will sort itself in court.
Yeah.
You get it. So they invested so much into vote protection. One, by maintaining one center of command, and secondly, by ensuring that their agent at the polling stations, by the time the results were being transported, they already have their copy of their at their command center, such that if a result from a polling station A is uploaded, they compare. Say, this polling station A, this is what has been scored, and then UPC will also produce a copy. They will check in that copy. If there's a disagreement, it is put aside, and then they must follow back what is true, what has happened.
Actually, to attest to that, by the time they were reading the 29th polling station, 29th, I was seated just right next to the UPC agents in the tally center.
Yes.
Ken was just seated just right adjacent. By the time they read the results from the 29th polling station, UPC had actually 100% their reforms at the tally center.
So that's how quick.
But Sam and my brother, I believe I speak for the general public when they say from being able to mobilize. We know that rural politics is about mobilization. From being able to mobilize to follow up elections, to have your election observers and have all the declarations in that flow, is because UPC, due to its marriage with the NRM, is not strong-armed. For example, like NUP, where they would take them out at every single point or at every single corner. That is the general sentiment. Vis-a-vis what you talk about, service delivery and all these other factors.
Yeah. I want to tell you that if such had happened, to be honest, it was going to have a very huge impact onto the NRM party in the entire land. I come from a sub-region. You see, the party, the Langese don't look at the party. They look at individuals. If they like you, they will do all it takes to be with you. And if they don't, I'm very sure even the NUP candidate at one point, they could have told him, like, you know what? You first wait. They could have told him. But of course, being fronted by the party and all that, he had to represent the party.
Yeah.
But literally, he knew very well that it wasn't going to be an easy thing. Dr. Eunice was a good candidate. If NRM by any chance had decided like what happened in Kayunga, whereby, of course, in the middle, at midnight, some election, you're seeing a different result, different candidate being declared. If by any chance they had decided to do that, to be honest, the Langese were going to fight hard, they were going to lose, but that was going to be the end of the NRM dominancy in most of the districts. Because, first of all, one thing with Langi, when they stick to something, they will popularize it. They're very eloquent. They know how to talk to their people. They all the bad things were going to come out. But I think they made the right decision. They said, let us respect the will of the people. Let us concede to prevent other future bad luck, or I can say other issues that would come in future that would literally affect us as a party. Because they really need Lango, Acholi, and West Nile, Karamoja. The party needs. But also, I think they also ignored the quality of Jimmy Akena. I come from Lango, as I said. If we look at Akena, people feel like Akena is Obote. If I'm running,
that genetical or merit?
Just the way they are, like that natural love.
There's also the genetics, yes.
Akena is the only MP in northern Uganda that campaigned for 1 or 2 weeks for the general election and win massively. So there's that natural connection because of what Obote did to the community, and they feel like in this family, this is the only person that's decided to come out clearly to show. So literally, the spirit of UPC
I was also surprised
to
see him campaigning in English with a translator.
He doesn't speak Langi all that fluently well. But of course, the legacy of the parent,
I think that's
of
a
the
testament
father.
to
Exactly. So even, let me tell you, if I can just pass by and just wave to the community, people would imagine it is Obote who is waving. I don't know. It's just natural to them. Exactly. So that's the aspect that NRM ignored and say we are going to go head to head with him. And when I saw the video, him arguing with
Tangadoy.
It has never been, because
Because,
he's just known as a calm guy and all that. So to them, it was like a sign of disrespect. So you are coming out with your arrogance, you are trying to disrespect us in our area and all that. That's how it is translated. And politically, it would make sense to the side of Jimmy.
Yeah.
But also, I think if one day, which I think that's what's most likely to happen in 2026, probably the UPC as a party might not front a candidate because of maybe the alliance they have with NRM, and of course NRM is interested in the sub-region, but there's going to be a very big fight in the levels of MPship, members of parliament, because most of the time what has been happening, UPC has not been taking key interest in filling up some of this position. But now that they have tested what has happened in Oyam, and they have seen that there's some natural love, of course not in some, there's natural love for us. And if Honorable Jimmy cannot decide to invest most of his time campaigning, reaching out to those rural people, and ensuring that speaking to them the truth. Because there's that ownership that they have towards the party and the family. There's that respect they give. The elders respect because they are brought up during the UPC regime and they play a very key role. I cannot go and run in a constituency without first getting used to my elders around. They need to appreciate who I am. Because when it comes to campaign, they're the one going to talk more. Me, I will unleash my manifesto. They'll have to add in some more sugar to make it look sweeter.
There are fireplaces.
Exactly. And then later on, now the community go back and disintegrate within themselves, and the discussion continues. So I think if UPC decide to do what they have done in Oyam, in all the constituencies in Lango, I am very sure UPC can take 80%. But to save the president, of course, not to save him, but of course just to maybe the alliance is still working. I really don't know. I have no much. I've never read the agreement. But of course, Jimmy or another person from UPC might not decide to run for presidency. That's, if it happens, that's good, but it'll be very dangerous because the Langese will just say one thing: let him go and lose with my vote, our votes, and it's enough in politics. Someone will tell, let him go and, he's our son, let him go and lose with our vote. If the people from Central and Western and Eastern are leaving, let not be counted among the people who are.
So it would divide the best.
Exactly.
No, it makes sense. And I think, Lowell, just before you come in, I was actually coming to you. Another sentiment that arose from the public was that it's also important for UPC to have MPs to maintain its leverage in its marriage with the ruling party. But Lowell, you have something to say, but also I wanted to speak to what you said earlier. You know, the president distancing himself from, first of all, from Bukedea, where he said, no, this is not our we have rules of engagement for elections. This is not what the NRM does. And secondly, in the recent election where he conceded. So does this show that, I mean, is this enough to show that we have a progressive president and a progressive regime?
I think not progressive regime per se, but for me, I wanted to just wrap it up in line that all these conversations must happen in light of the transition. Because I think we are at that stage and everything around it either is a consequence of that faith or can foretell what the coming trends. So first, I think about the relationship between UPC and whether getting MPs gives UPC negotiating power. I think before that, you need to understand the president, Museveni. I think he understands this country and he understands the historical trends. He understands where we have come from. And I think that even if UPC had not won that election, Museveni still understands the demography of Uganda, and he knows how important even having the Obote family or UPC in its historical nature is good to keep close. And I think he understands the same even for DP, those traditional parties. He knows they are very relevant and he would do everything that he can to keep them in a good, friendly relationship. But also, I think that why his analysis is very critical on what UPC could become in the next election, for me it is how instrumental it would be in the transition sense. I am one of those people who don't believe that perhaps the president will go in 2026, but I don't think he has more 15, 20 years. And for me, in the history of a country, I think those are not very many years, given that we have had...
And they're very consequential to our youth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what that means is that the time post Museveni, like he said, who has managed not to have instruments and tools of coercion, but generally have this general goodwill that he generated when he was coming and has been able to capitalize it and resources. I think when he leaves, there is going to be a reduction in that kind of wide power. And much more likely is that we're going to also have remobilization of power centers, like you said, based either on ethnicities or individual interests. And so I think it comes timely that during the transition, you're going to have UPC again become a player, and that whoever is interested in the politics must start to reopen up, and then the business people call it balancing books of accounts, but trying to do the mapping and predicting the future. I think that the transition is that people are going to, even now, people are going to start to imagine a period post Museveni, and I think that's when, because most people are, why did we study these things in history? I think now those things are going to become relevant moving forward.
Thank you,
but also this nature where Museveni says, I'm not part of that corruption, when he condones iron sheets. I think even when he doesn't mean what he says, because most people think he's pretending, but the fact that he finds it important to say that, I think speaks to his trend as a person, and how he's reflecting on himself and how he's reconfiguring himself moving forward.
Thank you, Lawel. And you bring a very important point about, how the future of elections, especially that this is a youth conversation, and we'll be delving more into that for our dear viewers in the second segment before we tackle the issue of the student loan scheme that was suspended. But that brings us to midway of our conversation today. Stay with us. This is the Youth Roundtable, where we are breaking down the affairs concerning the youth and the wider issues stemming from what happened in Oyam North, where we saw Dr. Eunice Apio coming out triumphant in the election. Thank you very much, and stick with us.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media, or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome to the second segment of the Youth Roundtable today. We are continuing with the discussion on our reflections on the Oyam North election, and we are going to go straight into it. And Mr. Oyeki, in the last segment, we had a discussion where you discussed your experience with NUP, as NUP in the election. I believe you are mostly observers, and with your observant eyes, I believe you had a lot of time and space, and not a lot of mass on you this time. What was the difference between the NRM fighting UPC in Lao and the NRM fighting NUP in Kayunga?
Well, first to clarify, we were actually competitors in the election. We were able to sufficiently convince 400 people to wake up early in the morning on the polling day, move out of their houses, and come and cast a vote. You see, that is very crucial for an institution like a party like the National Unity Platform, given this nation's history. but also as we have spelled out the history of the people of Lango vis-a-vis the politics. I remember sharing that letter that Museveni wrote in regards to Bukedya with our party secretary general, and giving on what I think its implication is in Oyam. And with Museveni sending us back to history in that letter of 1980, of him going to the bush, fighting against Obote because he was accusing him of voting. I think that was spelled out in this letter. So to me, it was just beyond Bukedya. It was a reflection of what would happen in Oyam. Okay? And as Lowell mentioned, the attempt to try and rebond or correct history, I should say. As I mentioned, Museveni did not go to the bush because of election, because he felt that Obote rigged him out. But it's because of disagreements in power sharing when they came from Tanzania. So, as Lowell mentioned, I think Museveni is at a stage of what happens when I'm not there, both for his legacy, but also for his family. Because I'm very confident, I'm sure that he would wish his son to be part of the country's politics at one point. Now, whereas it was unfortunate that we got those number of votes, but these are human beings who came out, who believed in Daniel the candidate, and also by that nationality platform in a place like Oyam North. As we mentioned, even while I was moving in between the night before polling and the next day, I knew what had caused at the tally center was going to cause, did not rub the tango doors the right way. And indeed, that night, there was a bit of a search. Because somehow I was able to move out of Oyam, stay in Lira for the night, and then return the next morning. But even then, there were attempts at rigging. Whether there was success at that, because we have seen the videos that were moving around of people in the security going at the polling station, and then putting the agent, the polling assistant at gunpoint, and then taking those ballot papers. It wasn't, if it wasn't for the intervention of the Jimmy Akenas, I think they might have succeeded. Also, the relationship between Jimmy Akena being a former first son, it's why I said actually Tango only then realized that it was only a houseboy in a broader power play. You know, he did not have a place in the politics of the place, because then he realized that actually he was not as deep into the state as Jimmy Akena was. This is the son of a former first president. So for me, I think it also came into that political interplay of the, as Lowell mentioned, the power centers. Tango Day was a nobody in that election. You know, his role was just as good as my role of going, trying to mobilize people to vote for your candidate. You know, but the real power centers that game was the Obote family are playing the politics with the Museveni family. And that brings in that response to the question of Kayunga. And me, I think I still want to argue from a point of history of the North, as you mentioned, having come from a place of war. And now there's a question of development. And then there is the nature of the candidate. Because actually Angola has been an opponent, even to Daniel Okello for Councillor, and he was beaten. Okay? And then these allegations of him running around, misusing arms within Oyam Town Council. I think they call them the Ago, the street boys. And as he mentioned, for us the question of culture is very important. When a son is seen to be fighting against his own father, you know, on certain fronts, culturally, these are questions. People question
on character.
The character, you know. And then so Oyam North vis-a-vis Kayunga, as you mentioned, the wrath of the state towards the nationality platform. I don't imagine if Jimmy Akena politics was not at play, but also Museveni couldn't be the same person betting, okay, gun ballot. I could name it that way, in a place where people perceive, or he perceived himself as someone who went to the bush because the area where that person, the person who comes from that area, presumably rigged an election in 1980. So probably he was trying to play safe to history as well. In Oyam North, playing to the politics of history. Or I cannot be the same person who accused the Bote of rigging elections and I had to jump to the bush. And then I'm abetting the same vice of rigging in Oyam North. So the Tangas were actually, educated as he was not reading to that politics. He was not alive to that history. I don't know why he could not grasp that basic concept that he was nowhere at play in that election. He was just as good as us, powerless, reading to the people, casting their vote. For me, as a mobilizer and as an organizer, 400, if only you could know the identities of the 400, I think that number is good enough to mobilize into the next 5-10 years to come. As you mentioned, as Lowell mentioned, in the life of a country, 5 years is like a day or two. 10 years a day or two. May believe that 400 votes or the confidence of 400 people to wake up. And I would want to mention this to my brother. There was also a question of definitely the commercialization bit of the politics. Being a by-election and by virtue of being because every political party traditionally receives some funding from government. But also when you cast in the question of history plus some bit of resources, you're able to garner sufficiently those number of votes. And UPC is definitely not innocent to that because a night prior to voting, you find that all parties, both parties heavily invested, which so the politics is commercialized. So sometimes you find yourself having to play to that politics until you reverse, as I will say, post Museveni, we may say a reversal of this kind of politics, where you must actually buy a voter to come and cast a vote. So Kayunga, the state definitely had to went hard on us. The general fear of the state towards this young group emerging. I would think they would have loved to go that way. At the lower power centers, but obviously the head, who was Museveni, was not ready to play into that politics, that politics that would taint him in history. Because indeed they attempted. They attempted to go that way from what happened on polling day. With the tango doys, then you hear the testimonies of the polling officials, but they were overwhelmed by the history of the place. So I think for me, it was a question of a mix of history and also the relationship between the Museveni family and his eventually soft heart for the Bote family. In conclusion, you could clearly see that even at the time when these people came into power, and Sejusa occupied the house of the Mobote family in Kololo, Museveni had to order Sejusa out of that house. So you can clearly see, whereas there's the difference may be political, but while in Tanzania, actually, Mama Mary Obote actually was able to support many of these people who eventually came and to overthrow the government. To overthrow, he was able to house many of them in Tanzania. So there's that history at play in Oyam North. Whereas in Kayunga, it's the state trying to prove that we still have influence. We have the monopoly over violence. We have the monopoly over who wins. And Museveni actually coming out openly to say we decide who wins. I think in Kayunga, that's what he mentioned. The change of tone also can also be playing into the politics of 2026. Of how do I maintain the demography of the North, as he mentioned, and the people of Lango, of Acholi, because they went hard on us in Omoro. Omoro is just a border neighbor to Oyam. So to me, the politics of Oyam North, it was the politics of UPC. The historical politics of Museveni's relationship with the UPC.
Thank you very much. And I think you bring it out very clearly, defining how some of these power centers sustain themselves. We see even with Tito Kelo's son, within, maybe it's a way of sustaining. But then another thing that I picked from you is the culture of losing competently. That I think is really important for
it's
the
very
system.
important.
For someone like NUP that recognizes that Buganda is where we started from, but we are a national unity platform.
Exactly.
So to competently lose in some of these areas just to progress.
Those are many people. 400 people woke up
I think it's something that I picked from your discussion.
Yeah.
That but just to close this issue, I wanted to go back to her. Still a little bit. I know you're the only lady, but I think it's always empowering and uplifting to see a woman.
The only district with
yes,
female leadership.
Yes, to see a woman, coming out. There are not many of outside women MP position. Is this a testament of progress? Because previously we had to protect. Okay, we still do protect women using the women's MP position, and Uganda is pretty much a success story of gender balance, but because of affirmative action. But now we see women competing on merit, and what do you think about, in the light of Dr. Eunice's view?
Generally.
Thank you so much. And for me, I think this election clearly just highlights that the context in which Uganda operates is evolving.
Yes.
And I think it's also something that Ugandans are starting to appreciate.
Yeah.
Because even from this election, you'd think that I think the ruling party thought it was business as usual. And they were caught off guard for this particular one, because you'd see, for example, the role that the community holds in relation to decisions. But also when it comes to the quality of women coming up these days, I think as much as it was also a question of how the UPC party has a great foothold in the sub-region, but also I think the quality of the candidate that was fronted. I believe it was not just, let me say, because it was entirely UPC, but also
I think he mentioned the criteria, which is just even beyond her academic qualification, the bonding with the public. And
exactly. And I think that is what people are looking at these days. It is beyond which political affiliation you're attached to, but also the quality of debate you bring to the development agenda of the district, for example. Because just like they've been sharing, I've been listening in, and for Oyam in particular, it's now about the development agenda. It's not who brought peace and who did not. I think it's about who is bringing change into this community, because and also one thing that comes out strongly in politics these days, it is about the question of service delivery.
Yes.
I believe even if you've been in power in a particular district for 10 years over, but then what have you been able to bring? And I think that is also something that the NRM party has to learn from. Because, I mean, should you only have to wait for that moment when elections are happening to carry the entire government, for example, to be in that constituency? Why don't we see these things coming up when it's a question of, is there medication in the health facilities? Why don't we see all these people rallying up to ensure that this has come to pass? But also, I think the election clearly puts the connection between reality and the history part of it. And I think that's also where they really lost it. That, I mean, still I would say it's a woman that has been fronted. And, being just the only woman on that ballot paper, I think it also speaks a lot, because you'd also get to appreciate that it is now that the community, that voters are actually coming up and voting for quality. Not that, very many times these days, if an MP passes on or a legislator passes on, it is automatic that you definitely know they are going to front, for example, a son or a daughter. And I think Ugandans are shunning that away. They're no longer about just the sympathy. But I mean, what quality are you bringing? And I think that's also something that we're seeing women taking up political spaces, not just because this is a woman, but because of that quality that they bring. And I think that is something that these political parties had put off guard, out of which I think this is something that is a good direction that democracy is taking shape into this country.
Thank you very much. And that's why I said earlier that we're really lucky to have Honorable Sam Ogwal, because while we analyze things from a distance, the people of Lango have no, the roads are not in a good state. I remember I drove to Aleptong from Lira and then to Kampala, but Aleptong to Lira was more tiresome than Lira to Kampala.
Sure.
And I think as we close this discussion on the election, for me, what I picked out as the moderator listening to you is the symbols. The symbols. It's a small election that, like Lowell said, but there are a lot of symbolisms that we pick. For example, he talks of an aging president reflecting on the nation. Sam talks of service delivery, accountability. We talk about, the gender issue. We talk about a national unity platform, competently losing, but also progressing towards becoming a national. And that is something that I think I have learned, and I hope our viewers have also picked from this discussion. But as we move on to wrap up today's discussion, Honorable Samogwa, last week we had an announcement. I don't know if they were trying to put all the bad things once, but also a few weeks ago, we also got to know that the National Youth Council, the budget was cut by over 80%.
Wow.
And it was a shocking figure, to run a whole National Youth Council in a country with one of the world's youngest population at 800 million per year, which is about $200,000. NGOs use this to run small projects. So, and then last week we have another announcement that the student loan scheme, which has been there for 10 years, has been cancelled as well. Why are we seeing this trend of cutting money? Is it genuine disinterest, or the government maybe just doesn't have money? Yeah.
Thank you very much, my brother.
Yeah.
I think as a country we have a problem. Yeah, I come from the NRM, but I think there's a general problem as a country. I think the people who make decisions are no longer patriotic about this country. To the fact that if you put your energy towards the bigger population, the 78% that are below 30,
yes,
it means that you're not looking at the future. You're just looking at the current situation. We have money in this country. The same period where the announcements of the National Council budget came in is the same period whereby Parliament was organizing, I think, the first sitting where the president addressed, and they almost, some would you say they spent 30 billion just organizing that. The next week, of course, the Minister of Finance was organizing, of course, a similar kind of meeting. And of course, he said that another 30 billion will also go into that. And that in total, that is 6 billion.
Yes.
Now, when you connect what is happening now, the National Youth Council in the previous financial year, because we are now in a new financial year, government gave us allocation of 4 billion. And out of that 4 billion, they did not even release it to that level. We only got like 60% of the release of the 4 billion, because in budgeting, when you're budgeting, you budget for an allocation. And then the release is based on the actual resources available that has been available to you to use. That means now you need to come back and reprioritize on your on your key priorities, what need to be there, what is very urgent within what has been available to you to use. But that's the unfortunate bit. After not fulfilling what they committed to, they again went back and cut it even to to the greater extent. That's not a smaller cut, it's to the greater extent. And as an institution, we have a very huge operational cost, and just salary alone is around 138 million. So right now, every quarter, this quarter, we're expecting to receive not even 200 million, might even be less than that, because the 200 million is the maximum limit.
So 138 is salary per quarter?
Yes, salary per quarter for the staff and the secretariat. That means that the initiative for supporting the district has to be suspended. That means that the executive will no longer have to move out to the field and monitor some of this program, including the district youth leaders.
Yeah.
That means that the key statutory obligations like the executive meeting, and also we had even the council sitting where we bring youth leaders together will no longer be fulfilled. That means that even our priorities, because we had planned that we now need to support the young people in terms of empowerment, and it was key on the priority, will no longer now be done. So a lot of things have been affected with that cut. But of course, going into the student loan scheme, I think government need to change their approach of handling things. When you look at the money that is going to the local people, these are students who are unable and unfortunate that, okay, fortunately enough, they belong to the youth group, but the same people being affected, and yet they belong to the bigger population. Their family cannot support them academically. And we are talking about a country investing in human capital development.
Yes.
But also, you're not facilitating me for free. I know that I have a burden to pay back this money.
Yes.
So I think there's need to be some sort of reassessment before decisions are taken. Are we now trying to say that, can we remove the other, this one on merit, whereby the best candidate given to Makere and those ones, this scholarship, government scholarship, and also this one at the district. Can we now get away the resources that is there, and then we put back to student loan scheme? Because otherwise, we have seen students benefiting from that scholarship. They're not from the what? From the disadvantaged backgrounds. Chitendes, Mark, Ntare. If you look at it, you come from the north or from the east. Very limited numbers of students are actually what?
Government scholarships.
Yes, but now, when this decision was taken, I look at it from two perspectives. One, it is political in a sense that the politicians have taken too much interest in how this loan is given out. And there was already a generating debate. How many people are benefiting from this side? How many people are benefiting from that? What's the criteria of picking these people? Yes, we understand people apply. But literally they notice that it's going to have a very big impact in future. Because if someone goes and then says that, you know, the entire land they have given, and then only 20 people or 10 out of the number of students, it discredits the system. So I think they're trying to do something that would protect their image in future. But I think there's need for us to go back to the table. And then we look at this scheme. It's a very good idea. Most of the countries are implementing. For example, Kenya is doing very well, though they have challenges in payment, but of course, we could learn from that, and then put a system whereby it automatically can allow students to pay back this loan and to benefit other students. Or we do away with government scholarship and say all the allocation given for government scholarship, let it be scrapped. Otherwise, we have done analysis and noticed that these people's parents can pay. And then we put that money into the loan scheme to support the disadvantaged, intelligent, clever students from the community. But we also have a big challenge. I don't know why what happened in this country. The youth are always the target. When it comes to programming, they're the first. The youth, when we were talking about this PDM, the first target or the first program on the table to be removed was youth livelihood program. Vis-a-vis all these other well-creation programs, but youth livelihood was already like, know what? No, it must go. But when you move to the community where you come from, those, at least you can point out that there's a group A. Not all has been successful, but there's this group that's actually doing well. Now, when we move out now, they're like, let us merge all this and put into one fund. I was attending a meeting last week, and I must say that the youth doesn't have slot in PDM. So literally, the institution that support the young people is being, I don't know how I can say, but the institution that support the young people of this country is being victimized to reduce the level of their relevancy, so that it's not seen as effective, or they cannot do whatever the mandate. So literally, the youth leadership in this country is not being appreciated by government.
Do you think the state favors, young leaders that are committed towards service delivery vis-a-vis, young leaders that are more
praise singers?
Sorry?
Praise singers?
We call them sycophants, but I don't want to be so complex. People who are garnering votes. And,
I said praise singers.
Praise singers. Maybe
just to allow me to conclude and then I answer
Yes,
that,
yes.
is that, of course, we see a reversal towards supporting the young people in this country, whereby the institutions are being affected that support young people. Secondly, the programs that are meant to uplift the livelihood of the young people are being victimized. And then also, of course, when it comes to human capital development, the scholarship being also taken away. So literally, as a country, we shall reach at a time where we don't have any form of accountability mechanism to young people, other than just using this tokenism. We have vaccinated all of you, we have given you peace, we have constructed for you road, but in specificity, there is nothing that in future we might have. But of course, going back to your question, we see some of these institutions are composed of political players. Just like my brother, who is coordinating the youth wing of NUP, is a politician. And even if he was in NYC, he would still pay allegiance to what? To National Unity Platform. And the fact that most of these guys, the youth leaders, are politicians, having come through a structure known as the NRM system, because of the structures at the grassroots level, and how the election is conducted, with the regulation in place, whereby the issue of multi-party system is highly respected. For me to come up to the national level under the NRM party, I should have started from the village as an NRM candidate. I am not allowed to cross to be an independent or move to another political party during that process. If I decide to do that, I am disqualified immediately. So because of that nature of the system, of course you pay allegiance to your political party. But of course our law is very clear, which is our National Youth Council Act 1993 as amended, is that as long as you're put in that position, you should know that you're not serving the National Resistance Movement or National Unity Platform or Forum for Democratic Party, or you are serving the young people of Uganda. So you must hold the principle of non-party. That's why, to some extent, I would disagree with some of my leaders when they publicly lead NRM possession and all that. It's carrying a symbol that other colleagues are not
because
happy.
now one of the sentiments after the budget was cut on social media, there was a tweet trending that, but what does this is okay, but what does what does the National Youth Council do? You know,
because it would have been easier, because if I've created that dialogue between Unity Platform, FDC, whereby I am relevant not only to my side but to you all, and I'm seen as a unifying factor. In that case, it is very easy for youth wing or the youth who are affiliated to Forum for Democratic Change, the National Unity Platform, UPC, and to support because they see you're relevant. But to the fact that they see that, of course, first of all, during electoral process, these structures are engaged to participate in voters' mobilization for the party, but also out of that, because of that spirit of being engaged, and NRM, they give them some small money and they feel like, yes, but of course, the other young people be watching. So I think it's the question that we need to change our nature of work and how we interact with young people, and how often do we come out to advocate for them. Now the student loan scheme, we must come out very clearly. When an attack happens on my brother in NUP or to FDC or to, we must come out very boldly and say this is wrong. This is not how we can. And I think that aspect has been lacking. Clearly.
And I just wanted to pick on from you, Lowell. He talks of human capital development. I think it's a very important issue, but it's also not something we can deal with at a small level. We know he talked about the previous regime where people study all over the country. We had a lot of, Bachiga in Sacred Heart, in Laibi, all these places. There's a protracted system of human capital development. The student loan scheme at its peak was taking in 1,200 students, and as per last year it was 600,
and now zero.
And now we have the
negative.
We have the government scholarships that are largely being taken up by people from a certain caliber of schools, and largely in the central. Like where do we start to build a protracted system of human capital development through education.
Okay. I think on that, I disagree with him. I think the loan scheme and district quotas and merit serve different purposes.
Okay.
Because the issue with merit is that the presumption is that people who get it are the best brains in the country, whether they are from the top school or not. So any country which wants to develop must create an environment where its best brains are supported or are able to enter the labor market, human resource market. It is less about, for me, in my understanding, in nation building, it's less about equality, but it's about making sure that you have a labor market, which quality of labor, honestly, which is able to perform best, and you can then be innovative and you can compete at a global level. So the question is, do we need to scale down on one to capitalize the other? I think no. I think we should even avoid getting into the discussion of removing any to the question of how do we make sure that everything that is existent is made better, and we can even invest more money to create other ways to accommodate these young people. But I think what I want to say is, the truth is that our economy is doing badly. There is no money. And that is why, for me, the figures in the budget are very misleading. So the budget is bigger, but when you look in the details, the money put in human capital development has been cut by 83%. But what has been cut most is education, right? Education. And so these figures, what do they mean if the most important things, the figures show that the country is developing, but yet the budget is being cut. I don't know if you're getting it.
Yes,
the population is increasing, the reality, the competition in the region and in the world is increasing. But for you, in this century, it is the education ministry which is having these budget cuts. And I think for me, that's why I think we are really doing badly. But so what that also means that we must have an honest discussion that we are doing bad, and he's the finance of a government entity. He knows that we don't have money. Question is, how do you then jumpstart the economy? If you agree that the problem is that we have a big administrative structure, but also the question is then how do you scale down to make sure you're not spending most on things like salaries, on sustaining these institutions like there was this parastatals like URA, they are trying to reconfigure them into the line ministries. So how do you reduce that structure which you're sustaining, and most of the money goes into human capital development? And I think the president is not being honest. He wants to play the long political card while he can't sustain the economy. And I think it's going to have an effect, like we said, moving forward.
Is it a case of faking it
on
education?
Yes, on education. But what I wanted to talk to is, if we agree that the money is little, the question is, why is it that it is you being cut? I don't know if you're getting it. Of all sectors, it is education and then NYC, for example. One, I think that it is true that we are not having our priorities straight, because you realize that most of the loan scheme money was going to science students. It's just like a year after the president was preaching the gospel according to science, right? And then he's taking away money for science loan scheme, which is for predominantly science disadvantaged students. Interns are not being paid generally. Not that there's not enough resources, but even the resources that were existing reduced. I don't know if you're getting it. So I think there's a very big problem in priorities, right? But speaking to NYC, and I want to be very honest, because Jacob is maybe a colleague. There is a very big problem in our society, especially for the brilliant youth, to choose between their conscience, the right thing, and politics. And I always am very skeptical when our friends are crossing to the NRM. At what point do you remain true to your cause and then also achieve the politics? And I think I've had discussions with him on this panel. I think he has found a way of striking a balance, of knowing that his strength, even his bargaining power within the NRM, is about his quality in terms of what he stands for and what he offers. The problem with other colleagues is that they forego their value and they think that the best way to grow within NRM or even be respected is by praise singing. And so for me, that's my biggest, especially problem with Jacob. That when I saw him on the prayers, national prayers, and these things.
Ironically, the budget was cut
Yes.
a couple of days later.
Yes. For me, it's like he's more of an NRM youth leader than the national youth leader. But also, in the power of negotiation, if you've showed me that you need me more, you're willing to praise Sing, I have no reason to fear you. I have no reason to negotiate with you. So I know that Jacob wants to run. I know he's willing to praise Sing me. Even if I cut this budget at individual level, he has nothing. He's not a threat. I don't know if you get it. And I think he has failed on that test, and it has had an effect on NYC generally. He's not respected by the NRM. He can't negotiate, but also the youth don't see his value. So even when he says, let us demonstrate, the youth don't feel that a cut in the national youth budget is a cut on their services and their well-being. And it's so bad that it is much more likely that if Oyeki or Chagulanyi spoke against cutting youth money or youth being prioritized, NRM, I'm sure, would listen more to that clarion call than when NYC, which is responsible, speaks. I don't know if you get it. I feel like now the NRM has no big incentive to listen to that. Your voice is no longer loud enough to be heard. And I think for me, it's a consequence of people not really understanding the power they have, and it costs everyone else.
Yeah, and I think Lowell and Sam will have another session educating young politicians on their negotiating.
Negotiation is about followers. We were talking about Obote. When Obote was coming into prominence, it is because he had the Langis behind, and he was a good orator and all that. That's why the Bagandas were able to accept him and work with him, because now that is a factor. But the moment you lose that and forget about people who gives you the authority and embrace you, and automatically you lose your bargaining power. People don't take you serious. I agree with him.
And my brother, Mr. Oyeki, you were towing a historical line, and I would like to open this up backwards. The issue of prioritizing the youth. We know historically, a lot of our leaders, including our president, were groomed through very strong student and youth structures, including the NUSU at that time, and all of these other structures that were strong. I was talking to an elder the other day, and he was telling me that President Obote would even call these young people to State House, and you'd listen to them before his ministers. And by extension, you'd even let some of these student leaders from Makerere dance with Mama Miriam. And many of them would go back, But just to give a historical, line of what I'm trying to talk to, do you think it's a deliberate, system of this current regime to frustrate the youth? Because NUP itself is a formation of youth frustration, So could you please speak to that?
Well, I want to comment first, Lowell. He's a good student of negotiation. That the powers that be only respect you when you can negotiate from your position of strength, not from that point of negotiation per se. I've been together with Lowell through some of these trenches of confronting powers that be, both on the table and on the streets. And they will always point out those 2-3 people who challenge them. There was a time in 2019 when I think that's one of the biggest demonstrations I think Makerere has had against the fees hike. And we had to meet several stakeholders. Definitely, in a group, there will always be those who would want to appease the other end, and in so doing, somehow compromise the quality of the team and the debate. And definitely, the names that come out even till now, of people that gave headache their side, constructive headache, debate reason. You hear names like Lowell Muhwezi, Marion Chirabo, you hear names like Labas Liombo, that you do not compromise their sense of reason, even when they know that there could be a risk of not winning the argument. but also the powers that be actually respect and want to listen more to those that have a clear sense of argument, judgment, and position. Now, that is also, I think, a question of I would not really want to blame the powers that be. I think it's we as the young people have deliberately decided to toe that line of succumbing to the powers that be in the quest for power. But interestingly, those that have gone ahead to rise to power, actually those who confront power in its true sense. How do I break it down to the person watching out there? Obote getting expelled from Makerere University, you know, the food boycott. I think you have that history so well. The Museveni is actually confronting the powers that be. The first attempt to overthrow government for Museveni was when he was in his 20s, 1972?
72,
with the Mwesigwas.
Yes, with the...
Yes, you know. Even the present-day Chagulanis are people who have gone ahead to confront power on certain questions. So what Lowell says is actually what we, as the young people, you ask yourself what is going on as the young people, within the space of the young people. These unions, during the Obote times, I was shocked. Actually, the people that actually co-opted ONSA to the state were students like us, young people. Yes, they were kind of Rugunas. And then, in present day, just recently, because before, I think there were some adjustments that were made, then ONSA is now more of like a department and the Ministry of Education or something of the sorts. But before that, I think there was an arrangement where ONSA was able to exist almost autonomously. You know, you are able to question. Because you see, when you're co-opted, it's hard to see the wrongs in a certain space. So you find the problem first starts with ONSA, with young people hoping that when they win the favors of a particular section, they'll have favors to rise to certain levels. Unfortunately, Level is a witness to that. Such people have not been able to actually, even now, they're still struggling to rise beyond that stage. You know? Now, I would not really want, you see, it would be dangerous for us to shift blame to the power systems that be, because their intention is to minimize resistance.
And that has been a constant.
That has been a constant. Whether it is NUP that is in power, our interest would be how do we minimize resistance?
Yes.
So the question is, as the National Youth Council, with your head going to rub shoulders, see a very nice meal, focused meal, eat, and then all you say is, thank you so much, Mosei. You're not presenting the issues on table. And why should the president fear you? Why should the president feel the need to actually increase and not cut your budget? Because that's what should be happening. You should be increasing the budget for the youth council. Because the population of the youth keeps growing. We are the youngest population in the world. As you mentioned, interesting and laughably, $200,000 for population
one project in many projects by NGO.
That's a project of 3 months in an NGO. Yeah. So I don't want to glorify Obote per se, but I think the young people of the time were conscious in terms of leadership, in terms of even debate.
Including our president.
Including the president himself. You know? Yeah. So it goes to the question of, as Lowell said, even when I subscribe to National Unity Platform, if I find that there's something that does not augur well with what I believe in, I'd rather refrain than proceed. You know?
Our time is fast spent.
So in conclusion, I think the problem is not exactly the budget cut. It's the people that occupy the positions of those institutions where the budget is being cut from.
Yes.
As I mentioned clearly, when the head is weak, I think the question will not be when it will be, when or if it will be cut. Maybe the question will be when.
Yes.
Because either way, the Museveni regime is facing a very hard time financially because of several dynamics and factors.
Yes.
But then why would the Euro allow that to happen while he's the chairperson of the youth council.
Yeah.
That is what I had.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the end of a very fruitful discussion.
Yeah.
I would like to ask to do just a quick exercise.
Yeah.
Send a message to the youth in 15 seconds. Just to close this up, I'll start with you.
Well, we're the leaders of the future, and the future is today.
Yeah.
We've seen that the government has been doing that really well in the past with the students' loan scheme.
Yeah.
But then now when it comes to this question of suspending it, I think also it's really still goes around that issue of priority.
Yes. And
I also really would urge the government to really re-strategize when it comes to the recovery mechanism.
Yeah.
Of how the student's loan is being paid back. So just in conclusion, really, my word...
As for the money.
You can conclude. Please proceed.
Yes, so my word out there is for young people to continuously build their capacity, because you'll not engage in these processes without your capacity being enhanced.
Yeah.
So you really need to really acquaint yourself with the frameworks that your country really operates in.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Rima and Honorable Samuel.
I also wanted to give her my time, but not since she's...
No, for you have to talk to the
youth. I think as a country also we need to rethink on our priorities, but I must say that priorities is not developed, it is initiated. So the young people must front themselves and let them be seen as a priorities.
Yeah.
For now, the way we are not projecting ourselves as that.
Yeah.
When you look at, I was in Namibia, and I look at the liberation struggle. It was led by the student, and up to now, they have set out a system.
Yes.
So what is happening within our generation
is
that we young people, we have failed to identify our priorities at the country, or to dictate the priorities we want to see in place. Otherwise, we still have a long way to go. We must organize ourselves as well. We must unite, reduce unnecessary fights within. If anything affects a young person, it's affecting all of us. If anything negative is said about a young person, the projection is about the youth. It is not about that person only. Otherwise, thank you for hosting me.
You're welcome. And to our dear viewers, the youth out there, thanks for sticking with us through this show. I have personally learned a lot from my colleagues here about the election. A lot of symbolisms that mean a lot for our future as we move into transitions. I challenge you to listen and pick out those aspects. About the student loan scheme, still the issue of priorities. And as my senior brothers just said here, priorities are initiated. So let's initiate, let's stick together and develop our country. Thank you. It was a pleasure having you.